"Don't touch her, Isaac, you'll kill her." Dr. Ray's scream sliced through the Santa Barbara night. But Isaac's hand was already there, trembling, pulling the scorpion from the child's ear. Then, impossibly, the girl flinched at the sound of her father's voice, a sound she'd never heard before. A miracle, they called it. But Isaac knew better. Some miracles demand payment. Before we begin, please like, subscribe and tell me in the comments, where are you watching from? Globe showing Europe, Africa, United States, Canada, UK, Australia, Jamaica. Hours before that moment, the house had looked like any other summer morning in Santa Barbara. Golden lights spilling across the olive trees, the Pacific wind brushing the hills, and inside the mansion, a soundless world where every prayer echoed unanswered. Dr. Malcolm Ray was a man who believed in two things: God and science. He didn't believe in magic, didn't believe in chance. He'd built his fortune on precision, the kind of brain surgeries that others refused to attempt. Yet for all his brilliance, the one life he couldn't fix was his daughter's. Grace had been born completely deaf. And after 7 years, every doctor had said the same thing: irreversible. Still, every morning, the house echoed with prayer. Dr. Ray believed if God hadn't healed her yet, he would, in his time. But over time, those prayers started sounding less like faith and more like pleading. That morning, Isaac Cole had been sweeping near the front gate, quiet as always. He'd come from the south, from a small Louisiana town no one had heard of. He didn't speak much, didn't brag, didn't ask questions. The other staff said he was strange, always walking barefoot when no one was watching, muttering old hymns that didn't match any church songs they knew. But Grace liked him. Even though she couldn't hear his words, she always smiled when he was around. Maybe she saw something in his face, peace, maybe, or the kind of kindness that didn't need sound to be understood. Isaac's family was known for one thing back home: the gift. They didn't call it witchcraft. They called it healing. Passed down through generations, never written down, never taught in schools. His grandmother used to say, "Every sickness has two roots, the one you see and the one you can't." He believed that. But he'd promised himself he'd never use it again. Not after what happened to his brother years ago when he tried to help a neighbor's child. Some things he'd learned were best left untouched. And yet, working for Dr. Ray, a man so proud of his faith in science, felt like a test of that promise every single day. Around noon, Grace had wandered out to the gate while the gardener was trimming near the hedges. She loved to collect stones and draw in the dirt. Isaac watched her from a distance, smiling as she traced shapes on the ground with a stick. Then she froze. It happened so fast. One moment she was kneeling, the next she was convulsing on the ground, her body stiff. Isaac sprinted toward her. There, crawling from under her hairline, was a small yellow-brown scorpion, its tail twitching, its legs hooked to her skin near her ear. Without thinking, he snatched it with his bare hand, crushed it, and pressed his palm to her head, whispering the words he swore he'd never speak again. The prayer of release. Something surged through him, like static, like heat, like fear. He staggered backward, gasping. That's when Dr. Ray came running, shouting, "What have you done?" But Grace moved. Her head jerked slightly, her lips trembling. She turned her face toward the sound of her father's voice, a thing she'd never done before. The paramedics came. Dr. Ray rode with her to the hospital. Isaac stayed back, staring at his hand, which had swollen twice its size. The venom should have burned, but all he felt was numbness. When he went to wash the blood away, he noticed something else: the faint outline of a scorpion tail scar on his palm. That night, as the estate lights flickered off one by one, Isaac sat alone by the gate, whispering to the dark. He wasn't sure if what he'd done was healing or interference. He just knew he'd crossed a line. And somewhere in the mansion, a little girl stirred in her sleep, and for the first time, her ears caught the soft hum of the ocean outside her window. The same ocean her father prayed to every morning, begging for a miracle that had finally come. But not from the God he expected. Some people will tell you miracles don't happen anymore. Others will tell you they only happen to the faithful. But sometimes, they come from hands you'd never trust, from people you'd never believe. And if stories like this make you pause, make you question where real healing comes from, maybe it's time you stay with this one until the end. Because truth doesn't just live in what you can prove. The next morning, the Ray estate was quieter than usual. Not peaceful, just the kind of quiet that follows fear. Dr. Malcolm Ray hadn't slept. He'd sat by Grace's hospital bed through the night, replaying the scene again and again. A scorpion of all things. In Santa Barbara. It didn't make sense. And neither did the faint, almost imperceptible twitch in his daughter's ears when the nurses spoke. He told himself it was muscle memory. Wishful thinking. Anything but what it looked like. By dawn, the doctors were crowding her room. Audiologists, neurologists, every expert on his payroll. They ran tests, whispered, compared scans. One of them, an old colleague from Stanford, finally admitted what no one dared to say. There's activity in her auditory cortex. It shouldn't be there. Malcolm nearly laughed, though nothing about it was funny. He'd prayed for 7 years. 7 years of sterile hallways, silicone implants, and surgical prototypes. He'd offered his faith, his career, his fortune. And now, after all that, his daughter began to hear, right after a gatekeeper from Louisiana pulled a scorpion out of her head? It had to be coincidence. It had to. Back at the estate, Isaac Cole was sweeping the front walk again, as if nothing had happened. His hand was still swollen, wrapped in a strip of linen he'd torn from an old towel. The pain pulsed like a heartbeat, but he didn't complain. He'd learned long ago that real wounds rarely needed witnesses. The gardener passed him and muttered, "You hear about the boss's kid? Miracle, they say." Isaac didn't answer. He just kept sweeping. But inside, his stomach twisted. He could feel it. Something had shifted that day. It wasn't just the child who'd changed. It was the air around this place, heavy now, charged with something unseen. By afternoon, Dr. Ray's black SUV rolled through the gate. He stepped out, still in his hospital scrubs, eyes rimmed with exhaustion. He looked at Isaac for a long time before speaking. "She's awake," he said. And she reacted to sound. Isaac set the broom down slowly. "That's good, sir. God's been kind." Dr. Ray narrowed his eyes. "Kind? You think this was God?" Isaac didn't answer, and the silence between them felt heavier than the California heat. "I want you to tell me exactly what you did," the doctor demanded. "Every second of it. Did you give her anything? Medicine? Well, what did you say?" "I prayed," Isaac said simply. The doctor's jaw clenched. "Prayed? To who?" "To the one who listens," Isaac murmured. "Same one you talk to, just not the same way." That answer didn't satisfy him. It couldn't. Science didn't coexist with mystery, it dissected it. But somewhere deep inside, Malcolm felt a tremor of something old, something like jealousy. Because in that one moment, this quiet man standing before him had accomplished what all his research couldn't. He told Isaac not to touch Grace again, not to come near the main house. "You've done enough," he said coldly. Isaac nodded. He understood boundaries. But he also knew the line between faith and fear was paper-thin. That night, the mansion glowed from within, soft lamplight spilling through the windows, the kind that made everything look safe even when it wasn't. Grace sat in her bed at home, turning a small seashell in her hands. Her father had given it to her years ago, hoping one day she'd hear the ocean through it. And then she did. It was faint, like distant wind trapped in a tunnel. But it was sound. She pressed the shell closer to her ear, eyes wide with wonder. She ran downstairs, giggling silently, motioning to her father that she'd heard something. He froze mid-prayer, eyes filling with tears. In another room, Isaac sat by the servants' quarters, whispering over his swollen hand. The skin had turned dark near the wound. Every pulse brought a wave of dizziness, as if the venom hadn't left but merely changed its host. He opened the old Bible his grandmother had given him, the one filled with handwritten notes and prayers. On one of the pages, the ink had smeared over a line that read, "When a curse leaves one vessel, it must rest in another." He closed the book quietly. The next morning, reporters lined up at the estate gates. Word had leaked, miracle healing at doctor's mansion, and cameras flashed from the road. Dr. Ray dismissed it all as speculation, but his voice trembled when he faced the crowd. "Medicine evolves," he said. "We'll investigate the cause scientifically. Inside, Grace laughed for the first time. Her laugh was soft, unsure, like someone learning how to use it. But Isaac wasn't celebrating. His ears rang constantly now, a low hum that wouldn't stop. Sometimes he thought he could hear whispers, words that weren't his own, prayers half-spoken in the dark. That evening, as he locked the front gate, Dr. Ray appeared again. "I told you to stay away from my family," he said. "I did," Isaac replied quietly. "Then how do you explain this?" The doctor's hand shook as he held up the latest test results. "Her brain shows changes that defy everything I know. You touched her, you said words. What were they?" Isaac looked at him steadily. "Words my people use when medicine stops working." "Superstition," Dr. Ray hissed. "You don't fix deafness with chants and hand tricks." Isaac's voice softened. "You sure about that, Doc?" "'Cause she's hearing now." The doctor turned away, shaking, somewhere between rage and disbelief. That night, Grace dreamed of water. Of a deep, echoing river and a woman's voice calling her name. She woke up crying, saying she heard "Mama" in the dream. Her father rushed in, heart pounding. She looked up at him, confused but smiling. "Daddy," she whispered. "I heard her." The words shattered him. He sat beside her, trembling, unable to decide whether to thank God or question him. Down by the gate, Isaac watched the mansion lights flicker through the fog. He could almost hear the ocean from here, though lately every sound came with a whisper behind it, like something alive. He pressed his swollen hand to his chest, whispering the only prayer he knew. "Take what's mine, leave what's hers." A sudden gust blew through the olive trees, sharp and cold. And for the first time, Isaac realized the gate behind him had opened on its own. He turned, but no one was there. Just the night wind and a faint, unmistakable hiss, like the rattle of a tail against stone. The child was beginning to hear. The gatekeeper was beginning to lose something far more precious. And the line between miracle and consequence had just begun to blur. The following week, the mansion seemed brighter, but the air inside felt heavier, like joy had moved in too quickly before grief had finished packing. Grace Ray could hear. Not perfectly, not always, but enough to make her father cry every time she said his name. The specialists were stunned, the press went wild, and Dr. Malcolm Ray became the face of a medical miracle. He told every camera that God and science had worked together, hand in hand. But late at night, when he stood by her door, he wondered if it was really God's hand at all. Because Grace had started whispering things that didn't make sense. She said she heard voices. Not the kind that come from people. They started softly. Little murmurs when she played, her head tilted as if listening to something just out of reach. At first, her father thought it was her imagination adjusting to a world of sound. But then one night she said something that froze him. She said she's sorry, Daddy. Dr. Ray knelt beside her bed. Who said that, sweetheart? Grace pointed toward the window. The lady. There was no one there. Just the curtain moving in the coastal breeze. Meanwhile, Isaac's condition was worsening. His hearing had dulled, replaced by a constant ringing that never stopped. The swelling in his hand had spread up his arm, like the venom had found a new home. But he refused to see a doctor. He knew it wasn't poison that was eating him. He'd seen this before. His grandmother used to tell him about transference, when a healer draws out what doesn't belong and bears it instead. You heal one soul, she'd say, and the ache finds a new heartbeat. Isaac was beginning to think the ache had chosen his. Dr. Ray tried to keep the media away, but stories had a way of slipping through walls. Every news station wanted to know how a deaf child suddenly heard again. None cared for explanations that didn't fit into data or design. And when Dr. Ray mentioned the scorpion, no one believed him. They called it hysteria. Coincidence. But Grace kept changing. She started humming lullabies her father never taught her, ones her mother used to sing before she left. One evening, Dr. Ray walked past her room and heard her singing softly, the tune old and sad. He froze. It was the same melody his wife had sung on the night she'd confessed something he never forgave her for. That night, after Grace fell asleep, he went into his study and opened the locked box he hadn't touched in years. Inside were his wife's letters. Most were apologies. One wasn't. It was a confession. I wasn't ready for her, the letter said. When I was pregnant, I tried to end it. I was afraid, Malcolm. I changed my mind too late. The doctor said she'd live, but maybe not whole. I've prayed every day that God would forgive me, but what if he hasn't? Dr. Ray's hands shook as he read. He'd never believed in curses or punishment, only biology. But that night he thought about Isaac, about the man's strange words, the way he'd prayed in a language that didn't belong in this house of logic and scripture. He thought about how Grace began to hear only after Isaac touched her, and how maybe her silence hadn't been scientific after all. Isaac felt it too. Every day, his hearing dimmed a little more. Every step closer to the house made his body tremble. He tried to leave, but something about the place kept him there, like the gate itself wouldn't let him go. One night, Grace found him sitting by the gate, eyes closed, whispering to the wind. She touched his arm and smiled. "I can hear you, Mr. Isaac." He opened his eyes slowly. "What did you hear?" "Everything." Her voice was small, but it cut through him like truth always does. The next morning, Dr. Ray called Isaac into his study. His tone was flat, professional, but his eyes were different, searching, afraid to understand. "My wife," he said, "she did something years ago. Something she regretted. Do you believe sins can live inside bloodlines?" Isaac looked down. "I believe some things are born deaf so they don't have to hear the pain that made them." Dr. Ray swallowed hard. "You think that's what this was? Punishment?" Isaac's gaze met his. "Not punishment, document correction." The doctor leaned back, silent for a long time. "If that's true, then why would God choose you?" Isaac smiled faintly. "Maybe he didn't. Some people spend their whole lives trying to understand why pain chooses them. They think it's bad luck or bad timing. But sometimes, pain is just the echo of something someone else never faced. And if you've ever felt that, if you've ever carried a weight that wasn't yours, you'll want to stay till the end of this story. Because healing doesn't come without inheritance." Later that night, Dr. Ray found Grace asleep in bed, smiling faintly. The window was open, the curtains swaying. He leaned down to close it and froze when he heard it, the soft hum of his wife's voice, echoing from nowhere. Grace stirred, whispering in her sleep. She said thank you. Dr. Ray stepped back, shaking, unable to speak. Outside, Isaac stood by the gate, hearing nothing but the hum of silence closing in on him. He touched his deaf ear, then the scarred hand that had saved the child, and whispered to himself, "The sound of sin's been past." Morning arrived pale and restless. A low fog rolled in from the Pacific, curling around the Ray estate like a blanket that didn't know if it meant to comfort or to suffocate. Inside, Dr. Malcolm Ray was staring at an MRI screen, hunting for logic inside pixels. The newest scans of his daughter's brain glowed in neat colors, yellow for activity, blue for silence. But the patterns didn't fit anything he'd seen in 30 years of neurosurgery. Her auditory nerves were firing in places that shouldn't even exist. The other doctors, his colleagues, his rivals, had started whispering words he hated. Unprecedented, unexplainable, divine. Malcolm didn't want divinity. He wanted data. Down by the gate, Isaac Cole watched the fog thicken. The wound on his hand had darkened to almost black. The humming in his ears was constant now, a long, low tone like something ancient vibrating through him. Sometimes he swore he could hear whispers underneath it, faint, pleading ones. He didn't know if they were prayers or debts being collected. He hadn't slept in 2 nights. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Grace standing in front of him, her mouth moving, but no sound coming out. Only that strange hum between them. Dr. Ray tried to focus on medicine, to prove that the miracle could be dissected. He ordered blood work, genetic testing, brainstem imaging. Nothing explained her sudden hearing. The medical team quietly backed away, realizing they were studying something that didn't want to be measured. That night, he sat alone in his office, the open Bible beside the microscope, torn between 2 worlds. His wife's confession letter still lay on the desk, edges wrinkled from being read too many times. The sentence kept replaying in his head, "What if he hasn't forgiven me?" He looked toward the ceiling and whispered, "If this is punishment, Let it end with me. The lights flickered once. The air went still. He pushed the thought away. Too much coffee, not enough sleep. He refused to surrender to superstition. But when he turned the desk lamp back on, he noticed something new, a small scorpion crawling slowly across the edge of the paper. His pulse spiked. He grabbed a cup and slammed it down over the creature, his breath shaking. Then, against all logic, he lifted the cup again. The scorpion was gone. Meanwhile, Grace was changing again. She began speaking full sentences, her voice unsure but steady. She described memories she shouldn't have, things from before she could even talk, before her mother left. She remembered the smell of lilies, the sound of hymns her father never sang. Isaac visited the garden that afternoon, keeping his distance, pruning the hedge that lined the drive. Grace wandered outside, still in her pajamas, and sat beside him. "You're sick," she said quietly. He looked at her, startled. "Who told you that?" "The same lady who sings to me," she said. "She said you gave me her silence." Isaac's hands froze on the pruning shears. The fog around them seemed to listen. "What else did she say?" "That Daddy doesn't believe in what can't be proved." She stood, brushed off her knees, and skipped back toward the house, leaving Isaac shaking. That night, Dr. Ray called him into the study again. The air smelled of coffee and sleeplessness. "I ran every test I know," the doctor said. "Nothing explains it. And yet you still think this was some kind of spiritual trade." Isaac hesitated. "I don't think, sir. I feel." Dr. Ray paced, the letter in his hand. "My wife wrote about what she did before Grace was born. You're saying that kind of guilt could become physical. Every sin becomes something, document. Some grow roots in the mind, some in the body. Sometimes they pass on. Then why would God heal her now? After all this time?" Isaac looked toward the window. Maybe he didn't. Maybe her mama did. Dr. Ray slammed the desk. "Enough of this." His voice cracked. "I spent my life cutting into brains to fix what's broken. Don't tell me some ghost did what medicine couldn't." Isaac didn't flinch. "You can't cut out what lives in the soul." The silence after that felt like judgment. Later, Dr. Ray sat alone again, staring at the sealed letter. Something in him broke. He tore it open, and a smaller note fluttered out, one he'd never seen. It was written in his wife's hurried scrawl. "If Grace ever hears again, it means my burden has lifted. You'll find me in the place where it began." Below the line was an address. Not a hospital. A chapel in Monterey. He left immediately, driving through the night, headlights carving through fog. When he arrived, the chapel was abandoned, doors chained, walls marked by time. But on the altar lay something he didn't expect, another letter. His name on the front, his wife's perfume still faint. He opened it with shaking hands. "Malcolm, if you're reading this, I've gone where science won't follow. I asked God to return what I took from our child. If he answered, 'Don't look for me.' Some healings require exchange." He read the line twice, then sank to his knees. Outside, thunder rolled across the coast, rare for California but fitting for a man who finally realized faith and proof might be the same storm. Back at the estate, Isaac collapsed by the gate. His vision blurred, hearing almost gone. The hum inside him was louder than ever, pulsing like a heartbeat made of light. He could feel Grace's laughter somewhere in it, bright, alive. He smiled. The transfer was complete. When Dr. Ray returned at dawn, headlights cutting through the mist, he saw Isaac lying there motionless, hand pressed over his heart. The doctor rushed forward, kneeling beside him. Isaac's eyes fluttered open for a moment. "She hears everything now," he whispered. Dr. Ray gripped his arm. "You're not dying on me. You hear me?" Isaac's lips curved faintly. "I do. That's the proof." His hand fell limp. The gate creaked in the wind. The doctor looked down at his palm, and saw, for just a second, the faint shape of a scorpion's tail scar burned into Isaac's skin. He looked up at the house, where his daughter's laughter floated through the morning air. And for the first time, he stopped asking how. Grace could hear. Isaac had fallen. And in the doctor's trembling hands lay both the prayer and the proof that some miracles don't come to explain life, only to exchange it. Sunlight crept slowly over the Santa Barbara hills, the kind of light that makes everything look softer than it really is. The fog had lifted, but the house on the hill felt hollow, too quiet for what had just happened. Dr. Malcolm Ray stood by the front gate, coat half-buttoned, eyes swollen from a night without rest. The paramedics had come and gone. There was nothing more they could do. Isaac Cole lay on the grass, still as the morning air, his face calm in a way the living rarely manage. Grace sat on the porch steps, her small hands cupped around a seashell. She pressed it to her ear and smiled. "It's loud now," she whispered. Her father turned at the sound of her voice, a voice that still startled him every time. He wanted to smile back, but he couldn't. Not yet. They buried Isaac near the olive trees that bordered the property, the same trees he had tended every week. The workers helped dig the earth while the doctor recited the only prayer he knew by heart. Grace watched, clutching a single white lily. When she placed it on the mound, a breeze moved through the branches, carrying a sound like faint humming, Isaac's hymn, soft and low. For a moment, she thought she heard him say her name. That evening, Dr. Ray sat in his study surrounded by files, scans, and the heavy silence that always followed answers too big for data. He had tried to explain Isaac's death to himself: shock, infection, heart failure. But no explanation fit the piece on the man's face. The letter from his wife lay open beside the microscope, its last line burned into his thoughts. Some healings require exchange. He realized he'd spent his entire life trying to prove that miracles could be mapped, that God followed formulas. Isaac had lived with no proof at all, only faith that love itself was reason enough. Grace peeked into the room, her voice careful. "Daddy? I can hear the ocean from my bed." He smiled faintly. "That's good, sweetheart." She hesitated. "But I heard something else too. The man who fixed me, he said thank you." Malcolm froze. "You heard him?" She nodded, eyes bright. "He said it's quiet where he is." The doctor felt tears sting, the kind that clean rather than wound. He lifted her onto his lap and held her until her breathing slowed against his chest. In the days that followed, reporters returned, hungry for closure. They wanted to film the girl who could now hear perfectly. They wanted the doctor to explain the unexplainable. But Malcolm refused every interview. He gave the same answer each time: it wasn't medicine. It was mercy. He spent his mornings at the clinic again, but not as the man he'd been. He listened differently now, to patience, to silence, to the space between words. When families asked him about impossible recoveries, he didn't quote research anymore. He simply said, "Sometimes the cure doesn't start in the body." Grace thrived. She learned music, fascinated by rhythm and sound. Every night, she left her window open so the wind could sing through it. Sometimes, when it did, she'd whisper, "Good night, Mr. Isaac," to the dark. One Sunday, Dr. Ray drove to Monterey. The old chapel from his wife's letter still stood there, sun-bleached and cracked. Inside, dust motes drifted through the light. He knelt at the altar where she'd once prayed and placed her letter there, beside a small carving of a scorpion he'd brought from home. "Thank you for what you left me," he said softly. "For what you took away." As he rose to leave, a whisper seemed to brush through the rafters. A woman's voice, familiar and kind. "She can hear now. Let her live free of it." He closed his eyes and let the tears come. Back at the estate, Grace ran through the garden barefoot, chasing the sound of the wind. She stopped by the gate where Isaac had fallen. A small scorpion crawled across the path, golden in the sun. She crouched to look closer. "Don't hurt it," she murmured. "He said they only sting when they're afraid." The creature paused, then scuttled into the grass. When Dr. Ray joined her, she pointed at the gatepost. "I think this is where the angels stand," she said matter-of-factly. He smiled. "Maybe it is." They stood there a while, father and daughter, listening to the waves breaking somewhere beyond the valley. For the first time, Malcolm heard not the roar of the sea but its rhythm, the same steady pulse that had lived in Isaac's songs. That night, Grace brought her father a drawing she'd made. Two figures stood by a gate, one tall, one small, and above them was a swirl of golden lines that looked like sound made visible. "What's this?" he asked. She grinned. "That's you and Mr. Isaac." He said you both listen now. He placed the picture on the mantel, beside the seashell and a framed photo of his wife. The three of them, man, healer, and the woman who'd once carried both pain and hope, finally shared one quiet room. Soft closing reflection/CTA tone. And if anyone watching this ever wonders where miracles begin, maybe they start the moment pride ends. Maybe they begin when someone stops needing to prove and starts choosing to forgive. If that thought reaches you, hold it. Because stories like this aren't meant to entertain, they're meant to remind us that what's broken doesn't always need fixing, sometimes it just needs releasing. Weeks later, tourists driving past the estate swore they saw a man sitting by the gate at sunset, humming to the wind. The staff said it was just the gardener's shadow, nothing more. But Grace waved every time she passed. "Good night, Mr. Isaac," she'd call. And when the breeze answered, soft, steady, like a heartbeat in the air, she knew he heard her. The gate stayed open that evening. No one feared what came through anymore. Because where science had ended, grace had begun. Some stories don't end with answers, they end with peace. What healed that child wasn't medicine or miracle alone. It was the power of forgiveness whispered through faith. And maybe if you listen close tonight, you'll hear it too, the sound of mercy that still hums through every heart that chooses to believe.